Hi folks, in this two-part video I'm going to complete exercise number 2. So to start off, let me open up exercise number 2. I've downloaded it from the course site and it's a little guest book. So first thing I want to note is this is something we haven't done yet. The actual guest book does two things. It allows you to enter a new entry, and it also displays the old entries. So the script basically has two parts. The first part is insert a new entry, maybe, and I'll explain the maybe in a moment. And the second part is let's dump out the database so far. So as we go through this, I'll be talking about those two distinct parts. The exercise involves a single table, so there's the definition of the table. As well, I've given you the code to start. So I've given you the starting code, and it's your job to fill in the missing code. As well, I mentioned here do no error checking. In other words, if the user enters a blank username or a blank message, there's no errors because I'd rather focus on the database. So, step 1 is we're going to create a database and a database table. So, to do that, first thing I'll do is start up EasyPHP. Okay, once that's done, I'm going to right click on the E and I'm going to go into administration because we have to get to the MySQL database system. So here it is, PHP MyAdmin. I'm going to open that up. Okay, we're going to be creating a new database. So I'm going to call this guest_book. So I'm going to create that database and then I'm going to select it. Notice there's no tables found, so, there's no tables found, so I'm going to create a new table. The new table is simply going to be guestbook TBL. TBL for table, so that I can distinguish the table from the database. This is a fairly common convention. You'll notice our table has 4 fields, so we're going to put in 4 columns. Go. So the first column, if we look, is an ID column. It's a primary, it's got a primary index and it's auto increment. So let's make that one. ID, it's an integer, no length, it's primary, and it's an auto increment. There we go. Now, next, the next field is a name field, varchar 200. We are allowing nulls, and there's no default. So, it's name, varchar 200. There's no default. We are allowing nulls, meaning what? The user is allowed to enter no data. And there's no index. Next, we have the message. It's typed text. As well, it can be null and there's no default. So we have the message. It's text. And it's allowed to be null. So I'm going to check off the null. And finally, we have the date of the entry, so we keep track of when the entries are made. So it's date, the type is timestamp, and this time we do have a default. The default is the current timestamp, right? Current timestamp. The reason we have a default is because whenever we make an entry, the entry happens at the current time, so that makes life easy. And that is not allowed to be null, so I'll leave that unchecked. So let's save that. Okay, very good. The table's been made. So it's time to create the project, so let's start NetBeans. So in NetBeans, we're going to make a standard project. So I'm going to say here, new project. It's going to be a regular PHP application. We're going to call it Guestbook. We're going to make sure we save it in somewhere that EasyPHP can get a hold of it, and that's SQL and program files, EasyPHP data, and then local web. Remember, if it's not stored in the right place, EasyPHP cannot serve it. And then in the local web, I'll make a new directory, Guestbook. That way, none of our pages get mixed up. So I'll choose next. It's going to run from the local web, and the URL is localhost guestbook. There's no framework, so we're finished. So, we're going to have our index page. That's the only page that NetBeans will create for us automatically. As you know, I like to do a quick test at the beginning just to make sure the project is set up. So I'm just going to I'll add an echo here. Whoops. I'll add in an echo here that just says this is the index page. And if I run that, we should see it. So that kind of confirms to me that my NetBeans is set up and it's ready to go. Now, in the exercise, I've given you the web page, so let's erase the contents of the index page and go and grab the one I've given you. So I'm going to click here, then I'm going to shift click down below. Right there, I'm going to copy all of the code from the exercise. I'm then going to right click here and paste it in. And you'll notice it'll give you a little error up here. There's some little cut and paste issue. All you have to do is remove the semicolon and put it back. And the error will go away. The other problem is you'll notice we've lost all our indentations, so the code's a little bit tricky to read. So let's select all the code and use Shift Alt F. That will automatically give us a nice level of indentation. Now, if you recall from the beginning of this video, I mentioned that the script basically has two parts. We have to process the form as well as output all the data so far. So if we look at the script, whoops, you'll see that, what am I doing? You'll see that there's the first part up here which processes the form, and the second part down here which outputs the data. Now, you'll notice that we need a database connection because I'm going to be possibly inserting data into the database. For now, I just put a host, user, password, and database, but we have to put in the real credentials. For simplicity and for reusability, I'm going to put that in a separate file. So I'm going to make a PHP file, and I'm going to call it database credentials. And in there, just like we did in class, I'm going to put 4 variables. DB user. I'll start with the DB host. And that will be localhost. And then DB user. And that will be root. DB password. That will be just quote, quote, and DB database, and that will be guest _ book. So there we have the basic credentials that we can use over and over again. Now I need the credentials in the index page, so we're going to make sure we require once database credentials.php. And now we can update our database connection. The first one is what? It's dbhost. The second one is what? It's dbuser. The third one is dbpassword. And the last one is dbdatabase. Now, I've connected to the database here. Now I'm going to need the database both up here and down in this last section. So I have to remember to close the database when I'm done. So I'm going to do that right away so I don't forget. So I'm going to close the database connection at the bottom here. So I open the database here. And I close the database down here. Now, I want to show you something else, and this might be the tricky part. Basically, I want to do a print R of the post array. Now, the reason being, there's two ways to run this script. The first way is to just go to the URL directly. If we do it that way, it's a get, so the post array is empty. If I click on the button in the form, it's a post. And that means the post array will be filled. Again, this is a little tricky, so let me do a demo. I'm going to run it.